Hello and welcome to Conversations. I'm Jim Below, your host. Very pleased to have joining me today State Representative Yousef Rabhi from the 53rd District. Welcome back to Conversations.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And just some quick background, 53rd District represents what geographic region?
Right, so that is most of the city of Ann Arbor. So we're talking about the west side, the south side, and the east side of Ann Arbor, and most of downtown.
Okay, and so a little bit of that stretch along the north is not part of your district.
That's correct. The Plymouth Road corridor in that area is in Representative Zemke's district, which is the 55th district.
55th. And you're now at the midway point of your first term.
Just about, yeah.
Just about, right.
Yeah.
And obvious question, is it what you thought it was going to be?
You know, it's better in some ways and sort of disappointing in some other ways.
More challenging.
Challenging, yeah. You know, disappointing to see some of the things that go on in Lansing, but definitely some big challenges too. But there's some ways that I've been really impressed with some of the things that have been going on.
Now, you came into the position having served at the county level.
That's correct.
And at the state level, what has been, you could say, the surprise, or has there not been anything you weren't really expecting as far as just the operations and how things get done?
Well, so I think one of the big things that shocked me, and I sort of knew this was happening behind the scenes, but it's the internal operational procedure that happens behind the scenes that not a lot of people get to see. But there are so many ways in which the process is not working the way that it's supposed to, the way that the Constitution of our state outlines that it's supposed to. And that's been sort of disappointing to see. And you know, I knew that some of that was going on, but not to the extent that
now, when you say it's not working the way the Constitution sets out, what types of ways is it not really working? That, as opposed to just how people make deals behind the scenes, but you make it sound like it's a structural.
Well, it is a structural problem. So the Speaker of the House wields basically unfettered power. The Speaker gets to make all the decisions of what bills come forward. And
when debate occurs,
and even gets to decide whether we get to vote on amendments to bills, right?
Okay.
So in our state constitution, there's a provision that says specifically that if 1/5 of the House asks for a record roll call vote to be taken, that vote shall be granted to the 1/5 of the members, right? And so when we make amendments to legislation, when we offer amendments to legislation, usually those amendments are just gavelled in or gavelled down on the opinion of the Speaker, right? The Speaker just gets to unilaterally decide whether these amendments pass or fail, even though our Constitution specifically says...
So it's not even a voice vote where you can argue whether or not the ayes have it or the nays have it.
They say all in favor say aye, and like nobody says anything. All opposed say nay, and nobody says anything. You know, there's like 2 or 3 voices here or there that that speak up.
Well, why don't they say anything? I mean,
because it doesn't matter in the end. The Speaker just, even if there are more aye votes than nay votes, the Speaker will do whatever he wants.
Right.
Even if there's more.
So is that by having that position, whether you're part of the majority or minority, is that inherently then giving that power or acknowledging the right of the Speaker to do it? In other words, at what point do you challenge that right? And has that been going on for more than the last 9 months?
Yes. So actually, challenges have happened in the past, but this in the last in the period of time that I've been in the legislature, we've actually challenged the Speaker's ruling multiple times. We've even come to the point where we've collected signatures from different members that were asking for a record roll call vote and have submitted those to the clerk and the Speaker. And the clerk has literally looked at it and said, I don't see 1/5 of the members, even though we had 38 members out of 110 that signed on to this thing. So there was clearly enough support for it, but they chose to ignore that in direct violation of our Constitution.
And is that, I assume the House also has a set of their own rules that sort of interprets what the Constitution lays out. Is that something which is just not randomly, but automatically approved each year based on which majority is running things?
Pretty much. And it's the same way that they choose the Speaker. The Speaker is chosen by the Republican caucus, basically.
Well, the majority caucus.
The majority caucus, in this case, it's Republican, And so the majority caucus chooses their Speaker, and the majority caucus basically presents the rules. Now, the Democrats have negotiated in the past for some changes to be made, and generally the rules pass, with broad support. But now seeing how things are sort of operating and how the rules really give the majority so much power, even The rules can't, supersede our Constitution, of course. And so our Constitution should always be
no one challenges it.
Well, and so that's the problem, is it actually has been challenged, interestingly enough. But when it comes down to it, the record of the House, the people that record what actually happens, is the clerk. The clerk works for the Speaker. And so when the clerk says and the Speaker says, we don't see 1/5 of the members asking for this, they can record in the minutes that not 1/5 of the members, And so I've live streamed it. We've gotten signatures. We've gotten, there's so many ways that we can try to put it out there. But the courts really just look at the official record of the House, which is our House
written
journal,
document,
our House journal, and that is something that's maintained basically by the majority party, right? And so majority rules, and the majority gets to write history.
Okay. In your 10 months now having served, you were appointed to the Appropriations Committee.
Right.
Which is that, I guess now it's not so unusual being a new member because of term limits. You have lots of new members. Appropriations handles what? All spending bills? All money bills?
Basically, anything that has to do with money. We pass the budget as well as the school aid budget. So we have two budgets that we pass.
Just the two?
There's the omnibus budget and the school budget.
So
right?
it's not like some where you have many different budgets and you have to sort of.
Well, so they're all sort of rolled into a larger budget. So there are a bunch of smaller budgets. Each department basically has their own budget, and there's a separate bill for each one. But they're rolled into like.
There's only one vote in a sense of the total package.
They can actually do it a variety of different ways. But they generally like to actually split it up into smaller bills so that more of their members, Republican members, can get their name on a bill, basically. But it's referred to as the general
budget bill.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that was done what, by June, was it this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by Constitution has to be done by what, October 1?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's when the state budget ends.
And
so if it goes past October 1st, then that's when we get to the shutdown, where they all had to shut down all the rest stops and stuff like that.
Yeah. Or they pass a 2-week extension.
Correct.
To keep, but that, okay. With the appropriations, what areas were you primarily focused as far as the general budget? Were there areas that you really kept an eye on, or being, as you say, the minority, it didn't really matter, or, what was your role in that whole process?
Well, so I was appointed to 3 subcommittees. So I was the minority vice chair for the Department of Environmental Quality's budget. So I got to play a hand in helping there. I also was on the community colleges subcommittee and the higher education subcommittee. So I've actually developed a really good relationship with the Republican chair of the higher education committee, Representative Kim Lasada. She and I work together incredibly well. She gets the value of higher education, and she's willing to fight for it.
Good.
And so I found a real ally in her, and I think that she's somebody that I can really work closely on, especially on this issue. Right. The community colleges budget, I think we came out basically at a wash. It wasn't a cut. It wasn't an increase. It was really just, we sort of kept the budget where it was. Was it a year or two ago
that the community colleges seemed to get a much higher increase than the U of M and the general four-year colleges?
Yeah,
that was to make up for some additional losses, let's say, over the years.
Right. Well, back in 2011, there was a big cut, basically, to all education. The one area that I was disappointed about this year with the community colleges budget is that they actually shifted basically the rest of the community colleges budget. They had already done this to part of the community colleges budget, but shifted it to our school aid fund.
Okay,
so the school aid fund is, in theory, supposed to just go to our K through 12 education. But now they've basically taken hundreds of millions of dollars that they were spending from the general fund on community colleges, shifted it to the school aid budget, thus freeing up.
Okay, the money didn't come with it.
No.
Right,
they freed up about $300 million in the general fund. So it's $300 million less going to our K through 12 schools.
Assuming the community college maintained the level of funding they had been gotten.
Right.
Yeah. So it's either going to be a reduction in the K-12 or a reduction in community college because there was not additional revenue going into the school aid budget as a result of that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a small increase in the school aid budget just overall because the taxes came in higher this year. But overall, it was a reduction for K through 12. because it increased a little bit, but then we put in the $300 million
that
of community
reduced
colleges that reduced the total amount that could be spent on K through 12.
Okay, so you're I would say not learning may not be the right word, but getting accustomed to how the budget is not only put together. Were there specific programs or policies from a funding perspective that you worked for that maybe you didn't get anything this time, but you're going to keep working on?
Well, one of the things that we really fought for was in the Department of Environmental Quality budget. There was a program that was proposed to be funded around vapor intrusion, right? So vapor intrusion is when you have toxic fumes, coming up through your basement or something like that. And the DEQ was proposing to put a few $1 million towards initiating a program that would help to prevent homeowners from being exposed to vapors in their basement. That was initially proposed in the governor's executive recommendation. It was stripped away in the House and Senate. Even though I introduced multiple amendments to try to keep it in, but it was taken out. Ultimately, though, we did score a small victory about a few weeks ago because it was actually put back in through a supplemental bill. It was put back in, and we were able to score that small victory for
you
the
mentioned supplemental. The budget was approved in practice, let's say in June.
Yeah.
But then how often can a supplemental or an addition, or it can also be a reduction, right?
Right.
Is that based on projections from the Treasury Department or budget, whoever it is that says, well, it looks like we're going to have X $1 million more, and how to determine that gets spent, or we're going to have X $1 million less coming in than we thought and make cuts now?
A variety of things can happen. They can shift resources from point A to point B within the same budget. The other thing that can happen is at the end of the fiscal year, as the fiscal year ends at the end of September, you have potentially surplus money from that previous fiscal year that you can then allocate and do a supplemental on the additional dollars that have become available because that fiscal year.
And that would be viewed as a one-time expense because it's, as you say, it's
in that case it would be a one-time because it's just supplemental dollars that are left over from the previous year.
Yeah, and you say the small victory of getting that back into funding, was that through 2016, 17, reserves that got left over, or is this something which hopefully will be able to be maintained and not have to come back every year and be added back in?
Well, we're hoping that it can be maintained, right? I mean, even if it is, even if they used one-time dollars to allocate it, we're still hoping that we can get it maintained into the future. We're hoping that this,
become a line item.
Right. The few $1 million that they put in to fund this is not enough to fully implement a program statewide. It's really just enough to get that program off the ground. Because now vapor intrusion is a problem that the Department of Environmental Quality has acknowledged exists, right? Which was
it's their first step.
Yeah. So we're making progress in that regard because we've all sort of known that it exists for a long time, but now the DEQ is sort of acknowledging it, and to their credit, wants to get that program off the ground. So we're hoping that we can continue that going into the future. I think a lot of it will depend on whether we can get a governor that's sympathetic to that cause.
Right.
So.
Well, I want to take a short break, come back and look at some of the other non-monetary issues that we're looking at as a state. And for you, ask our viewers to stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Did you know that CTN welcomes the members of the Ann Arbor City Council to Ward Talk? On the third Wednesday of every month, a different representative from one of the city's 5 wards joins us in the studio to discuss matters important to the people and government of Ann Arbor. Submit your questions for the next episode of Ward Talk by emailing ctn@a2gov.org or visiting our Twitter page @CTN Ann Arbor.
Hello, and welcome back to Conversations. I'm speaking today with State Representative Yousef Rabhi, the 53rd District, Ann Arbor, essentially. Other than money, which obviously tends to sort of overlap almost everywhere and have impact, going into 2018, what are other issues that you personally want to sort of spearhead, but also what you imagine over these last few weeks of 2017 will be coming up that you want to make sure people are aware of?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. I mean, so basically one of the things, and this maybe gets back to your first question, one of the things that I came to realize coming to Lansing is that there's a lot that happens in terms of nibbling around the edges, right, of like small bills that do small things. And I want to try a different approach to actually lay out a progressive vision of where I'd like this state to go. One of the top priorities that I have in that regard is around healthcare. There's been a lot of conversation nationally around, the Senate, trying to pass a repeal of Obamacare and the House. At the state level, I'd like to see us try to create a single-payer universal healthcare system. And I am working on a bill right now that would actually accomplish that for our state. It has, a lot of complex parts. It also has, a lot of complex funding associated with it. That's the number one thing, and we can talk about that more if you'd like. The second thing is in terms of alternative energy. We have an alternative energy portfolio in the state that is not that aggressive. It's 15%.
Right.
I'd like to see us actually set out where we need to be, which is 100% renewable by 2050. And I have a bill that would implement that renewable energy standard in our state. And I think it's important that whether or not that is an achievable goal tomorrow or the next day, I think it's an achievable goal by 2050 and something that we can set our goal marks in the field and say this is where we want to be and start moving the ball down the field to get there. And the third and final thing that I'll mention, though there are a few other issues that I'm passionate about, the third and final thing I'll mention is around universal access to education. We have some skyrocketing college and university tuition rates in our state because of declining state investment in our public universities. There was a time when students could get out of college and not be saddled by massive amounts of debt. I think we need to be looking at free college and higher education in the state of Michigan, and I think we can achieve all three of those things as a state if we start thinking big picture and approaching these issues not by being afraid of the magnitude of addressing these issues, but by saying these are big issues, let's start now to try to tackle them.
And how do you do that? I mean, you're speaking, as you've mentioned, being part of the minority. It sounds good to propose these. Realistically, how will you gain support across the aisle? Because it's going to take support from across the aisle to see any of those three or other programs that, as you say, are big picture and go, you could say, I won't say against, but counter to what has been viewed as the way to approach things.
Right. Well, I'll be the first to say there's a lot of things that stand in the way of all three of those things happening. A lot of big moneyed interests, a lot of legislators, and a lot of status quo that will stand in the way of us moving the needle on universal health care, 100% renewable energy, and universal access to education. But in my opinion, it's important that we set the goals and make it clear where we want to go. In terms of trying to work with some of those Republican legislators, I think that there's something in this for everybody. That's the whole point of saying health care for all. When you talk about universal health care, you're talking about, think about how much employers right now pay for their employees' health care in our state. Think of our biggest employers, General Motors, Ford, even some of our hospital institutions, and the amount of money that they have to sock away every year to pay for their employees' health insurance, right? That, to me, there's a business argument to be made in this insurance debate, right? The second thing is, we were talking before the camera started rolling about auto no-fault insurance, right? And the amount that we pay in Michigan for no-fault insurance. Think of how much our rates could go down if our auto insurance companies no longer had to cover our personal injury protection. that's covered through universal health insurance. So that's a cost savings for an individual, it's a cost savings for the businesses, and yes, taxes and some taxes and fees would go up, but I think that we would find that at the end, the universal health care system would be cheaper for everybody, businesses and individuals included, and we'd be able to cover everybody.
And how is it paid for? That goes back to what you were saying. You're saying maybe the health care costs for individuals may go down, but is that counted by higher taxes?
Yeah. So there's a few things. Number one, I think in Michigan we have some of the most unfair tax, one of the most unfair tax systems in the country. I mean, that can be debated, but we have a flat income tax. Right. We cannot graduate income tax in Michigan as per our Constitution. What that means is that we're reliant more on sales tax and on property tax, which are sales tax in particular is a regressive tax. Right. So if you look at tax rates and the amount of everybody's income that's being paid towards taxes, we actually see a skew towards people that are on the lowest end of the income scale paying a higher percentage of their taxes as compared to people that are in the top 6%. Right. So there is a proposal on the table right now that the House Democrats have authored that would actually decrease taxes. All right, decrease taxes for 94% of Michiganders. The top 6% would pay more. It would increase state revenue by almost $1 billion. Right?
Are you saying, and there's sales tax?
So this would be a graduated income tax.
Okay.
So this would require a change to the Constitution, but it would be a more fair way of taxing ourselves in the state of Michigan. If you look at what that tax structure would then look like, it would be that every income segment of the population is paying about the same amount of their income in taxes if we had a graduated income tax rate, because it would even out, right? You have the lowest income scale.
So what would be the top level be, based on what I heard you just say, that if the lower 10%, let's say, was paying 10% of their income, or whatever?
It's less than that, but
okay. So then at the upper level, it would also be 10%.
Right. So yeah. So right now, basically, what we're seeing is that just in state taxes alone, this is not we're not counting federal taxes. State taxes alone is that the lowest income earners in Michigan are hovering somewhere between 8 and 10%. Right. This is like the bottom 40% of income earners.
Okay.
Yeah. Between 8 and 10% of their income. The top income earners are around 6.5 to 5. Okay. 5.5. 6.5, 5.5. So
where does the issue of income tax is that what 4.1%?
Right. So because everybody's paying the same income tax,
right?
It is a percentage of their income, but because it's really the sales tax, because it's a regressive tax, because when you're only making $15,000 a year, you're buying the same amount of groceries.
Well,
as
we won't get
somebody
into that
who's
because it would seem
making
like
$1 million.
But the person making $1 million is buying the $50,000 car, which the person who's making $10,000 isn't, and they're paying the sales tax on that.
Well, there's certainly some of that, but the numbers speak for themselves, and that the fact that the top 6% of income earners are paying less as a percentage of their income than the top income.
In looking at all taxes.
In looking at all taxes together.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is by graduating the income tax, we would be able to even the playing field and make it so that everybody in Michigan is paying the same percentage of their income towards taxes when you add all the different types of taxes
Would
up.
that take into account Ann Arbor, where you're paying a higher property tax compared to other districts? Because at some point there's going to be a difference, won't there be, as far as percentage of income based on where you live, how you live?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to buy like 10 boats and 15
even
sports
one
cars,
boat or
I mean
car.
you're going to be right. But I'm talking about on average across the state of Michigan, these are the statistics that we see.
Okay. So looking then at one other thing you mentioned, other than the looking at education, to what extent, as far as a free education or a paid for college, does everyone have to go to the U of M?
Oh, absolutely not. That's why we have 15 great public universities in the state of Michigan.
And many community colleges and other trade schools and that.
Yeah.
Some of which, not all, but some of which can be afforded. I guess my question is when we hear about free public education college, there seems to be a fair amount of option right now where the cost can be, you say, less intrusive. If everyone wants to go to the U of M or one of the higher costs, yes, you're going to have much more as far as the the bills at the end of it all. You know,
But
how do you even that out?
Right. But I also don't think it's right for somebody to who is a high academic achiever to not be able to go to the school of their choice because they can't afford it. I don't think that's right either.
So if you're a high academic achiever, you should be able to go to Harvard or wherever you want.
If it's a public university in the state of Michigan, then I would
okay.
say yes.
Okay.
That's an ethic I think that we should all have.
And so the cost of an education at Eastern should be the same cost as at U of M.
I think it benefits everybody in the state of Michigan to make sure that regardless of income, people can attend the college of their choice if they are, you know, if they meet that academic standard that those universities put in place.
Okay, and I guess the follow-up then is, to what extent should the legislation be that, who controls the operation then of the universities as far as what it costs to run that program? I know the U of M has been criticized for having more out-of-state students at times because out-of-state students bring in more finances, bring in more money, the tuition's higher.
That's right, and there are already restrictions on how much they can charge for tuition or how much of an increase they can charge if they're taking state dollars without getting a penalty, right? And so they can basically opt for either to be capped on a dollar amount or to be capped on a total increase, a percentage increase, and they can choose which one they want. That's under the current system right now.
Right, and that has been, and I think will remain, an issue as far as the cost of education, both in the state and nationally, because that has been an issue that has become more and more of a national discussion point.
Yeah.
In these last few moments, looking to 2018, what will make it successful for you, realistically?
You know, I think in 2018, my hope is that we can get some of these bills out there. And again, like, you know, start talking about universal health care, start talking about how we can transition to a fully renewable energy portfolio in Michigan, start talking about how we can make sure that education is accessible for everybody. And I think if we can put the bills out there, put the plans out there, they're not going to be perfect. There's going to be ways that we can change them and make them better. But it's starting that conversation. It's saying to the community as a whole, not just Ann Arbor, but to our whole state, is this something that we want? Is this something that we want to achieve? Is this doable? Do we believe that healthcare is a right? Do we believe that we should be able to breathe clean air and not have global warming? Do we believe that everybody in the state should be able to access the colleges or universities that they choose regardless of their income level? Are those things that we believe, right? And so I want to start that conversation in 2018. And I think that would be honestly a successful year for me. I'm in the minority, and so I'm realistic that I'm probably not going to get very many bills passed right now.
But get the discussion going.
Let's get the discussion going, and let's have this discussion statewide.
Well, I'll ask you back at next year to see where things stand and if you've been successful by your and our definition of at least getting the discussion going.
Yes.
I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's been good to chat with you.
Great. I want to thank our viewers for joining us today and look forward to your continued support here on Conversations. Thank you.